Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. We are back for another episode. I think this is number 4 of Womansplaining Live, where I'm going to womansplain to you all of the things. For those of you that are new here or just don't know me, I'm Julie Barrett. I'm the founder of Conservative Ladies of America. So if you're joining us on YouTube or if you are joining us on X, say hello in the live chat. Let me know where you are joining us from. If we're going to be talking a lot about Washington today, so hopefully we'll have a lot of Washington folks here because I've got a lot to talk about with the sort of session cutoff and some of the worst bills that passed. I'm not going to really talk too much about the bills that didn't pass because they're not really, and people say they're dead, but they're not actually dead. I like to say they're taking a nap. And that's because the Democrats control everything. So in theory, they could suspend the rules and bring them back anytime they want. Plus, Washington state operates on a biennium. So that means next January, anything that didn't pass this year is automatically reintroduced next year. So it's not dead until the last day of session of 2026. So I don't like to take victory laps too soon when it comes to Washington. And so Leslie is in our chat. She is our Eastern region coordinator for Washington. She's also our Utah state director. So she'll be joining you there in the chat. Thanks, Leslie. And I think Mary is in the chat with us too. And there she is. So let's dig into this. If you guys have questions while I'm talking, please do put those in the chat because I will get to your questions later. So if you have maybe even like specific bills that you are wondering about that I don't mention, you can drop those in the chat. And if I know off the top of my head, I will answer you. So we are going to talk. Well, let's get some. We're going to talk a lot about House Bill 1296, which is repealing the I-2081, which they call the Parents' Bill of Rights. So we're gonna get into that. That passed the House at 2:15 a.m., which they like to do the worst of the worst bills in the middle of the night. And that's really predictable. But there were actually several bad bills that passed yesterday in the final hour that I want to tell you about because I actually, right before I came on here, I was like, ooh, that's really great because I don't think House Bill 1321 passed. And it did. But House Bill 1321 is that gives Governor Bob Ferguson, any governor of Washington, the ability to have authority over any out-of-state militias that might be sent into Washington, whether it is to help with, say, a natural disaster, maybe another state sending a National Guard to help deal with wildfire or border control or something like that. They would have to have the consent and the approval of the governor of Washington state before they could come in. Although the bill, they did change it a little bit so that the president does have the authority to send in the National Guard. But it's a bad bill because it does just grant the governor so much authority. Also, House Bill 1531 passed. I want to say that passed a couple days ago. And that is actually, I think it was Saturday. And that gives the state broad authority in a health emergency to basically hand down mandates. So think about like mask mandates, vaccine mandates, social distancing. We're seeing a number of bills this session that appear to be sort of a setup for COVID 2.0. In fact, there was a bill that was just dropped yesterday. And I know you're thinking, didn't we just have cutoff? Why are they dropping a new bill? Just dropped yesterday and already has a committee hearing next week. And this would be funding for wildfires. Or it says catastrophic events, but it does in the bill text, it specifies wildfires. So to the tune of $77 million is what they want to allocate to that. So it's interesting that, there's a lot of theories with the wildfire stuff, but forest management comes to mind. So that bill is is going to move right along. It's got an emergency clause, which means it will take effect upon passing. As soon as the governor signs it into law, it would take effect. And the fact that they dropped it so late, it already has a hearing, I would say that's guaranteed to pass. So what are the other ones? House Bill 1163, which is the permit to purchase a firearm. That bill passed also on the weekend. They debated that like into the wee hours of Saturday morning, and then they came back and did the vote on it in the afternoon on Saturday. That's a terrible Second Amendment bill. The other 2A bill that passed is Senate Bill 5098, and that is about firearms in sensitive places. So adds to the list of places where you cannot carry a firearm. Now, one of the things, going back to House Bill 1163, the permit to purchase, if you are a CPL holder currently, you would have to get the permit to renew your CPL. My good buddy, Bill Kirk over at Washington Gun Law did a really extensive in-depth video on 1163. Highly recommend that you go over to the Washington Gun Law YouTube channel and check that out. It's really good, especially if you are maybe not really that into firearms. Maybe you don't even own a firearm yet, or you're thinking about buying your first one. This is really a good informative video. Maybe you don't even care that much about the Second Amendment, but this video really explains to you why even people who, aren't really gun enthusiasts or, Second Amendment diehards should care about this particular piece of legislation. A number of other gun bills did go to sleep for a bit. So that is good. Primarily, the big one that people were really worried about was House Bill 1504, which would have required you to get insurance on every firearm you own and every firearm you buy. So they really are trying to make it impossible for Washington citizens to obtain a firearm. They're also trying to make it impossible for FFLs, those are the firearm dealers. They're trying to make it impossible for them to do business in Washington state. So the Washington state Democrats would be pleased as punch if all of the FFLs left Washington state and the manufacturers left Washington state. That would not make them sad. I don't know that they would like all the tax money that went away with them, but I don't know that they are forward thinkers like that. So let's get into House Bill 1296. So let's kind of talk about what Initiative 2081 did and didn't do, because I see, people are really up in arms about this bill, and rightfully so. It's a terrible bill. It's a big middle finger to parents. It's the Democrats saying that the state is parent. The state knows better than the parents, and the parents don't have a right to know anything unless we decide that they get to know. And parents need to, we hear all this, I will not comply. Parents really need to, this is kind of put up or shut up time about your compliance. If you're going to continue sending your kids to Washington's public schools, you are complying with these anti-family, and I will say anti-child laws. But what 2081 did is it was very narrow in scope, and calling it the Parents' Bill of Rights, I think, gives people the idea that it's more broad than it actually is. It only applies to public schools, and giving parents access to a number of different public school records. It really gives them access to everything in the public schools. So attendance records and curriculum, opting out of surveys, discipline records, mental health, medical health. It gave parents all of those access to all of those records, which they did not have prior to Initiative 2081. And this was run as an initiative to the legislature. So there were over somewhere between 450,000 Washington citizens who signed the initiative. And what the legislature was able to do, they could decide to pass it, or they could put it to a vote of the people. And you probably, if you're in Washington, you probably recall that there was a package of six initiatives. The legislature passed three of them, and then they sent three to the ballot. And I think just one of them passed. I forget which one it was. And I thought when they did the parents' rights initiative, I thought that was strategic for them because it was an election year and they wanted it to look good that they passed a Parents' Bill of Rights. But they said on the Senate floor and the House floor when they were debating the bill to bring it up for a vote, they said, we don't think this touches existing laws. But if it does, we are prepared to come back and fix it. And that is red flag number one. Huge red flag right there is that was your sign that they're coming back in 2025 to repeal it. Now, had they let it go to a vote of the people, they couldn't touch it for 2 years. So by them passing it themselves, then they could come back and fix it this session. So that's exactly what they've done. And there's on the Senate side, there's Senate Bill 5181, and they pretty much do the same thing. 1296 goes a little bit further than 5181. One of these is sure to pass out of the legislature. It will just be which one. And I need to go back and look at the two side by side again to kind of figure out the differences. So I'm not going to go through that today. I really want to focus on 1296. So if you're saying you're not going to comply and you're sending kids to the public schools, you are in compliance with what these Democrats want, and you're in compliance with the law that they intend to change. And basically putting your child in a very risky position. There's, if you've watched me enough, you've heard me talk about the things that have happened to my family and with my children in Washington, or my child in Washington public schools. That kind of thing is going to become more normal. People don't really talk about it because if you talk about the fact that the school tried to socially transition your kid and you did not support that, well, what do you think is going to happen? The CPS and the government is going to come for your kid. They're going to say that you are not an affirming parent, and therefore you are an abusive parent. They're going to take your child away. So parents are really quiet about this, but it's going to get to the point where it's so normal that people are there's no choice but to talk about it. So I would encourage you, as you're watching this stuff going on in Washington and you have a child in Washington public schools, please start looking for alternatives, because this is a very bad situation. And if you truly do not co-parent with the government and you truly do not comply, you got to get your kids out of there. So I want to, I did this post on X this morning, and just kind of want to go through my thoughts with you guys and expand on some of this a little bit. So when I first got involved in politics and stuff, I was all about parental rights, even before what happened with my kids. As I have, had more time and experience and watched the Democrats a lot, they're very good at messaging, and they're very good at messaging that they are trying to protect kids. And so when we talk about parental rights, that's about us, the parent. Instead, and this is the intent behind parents' rights, is parents have a right to protect their children. But I suggest that we reframe it as children's rights. Children have a God-given right to be protected by their parent, period. And we need to frame it as that. You do not have the authority to circumvent my child's access to me. And I'm going to read you something that one of my daughters wrote. She was actually going to testify on this bill and decided against that for a number of reasons. But I wrote, kind of alluded to it. I wish they would have just called my mom instead of telling me it was my right to decide. My life would be so different now. And so I did. She actually called me right before I went live. And I asked her, I said, would it be okay if I read part of your testimony in my live stream? And she said yes. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. Well, maybe I will. Since the age of 14, I've been in many situations. Oh, and she wanted me to be sure that you knew she's not trans. She never had, none of her stuff was gender confusion or anything like that. Since the age of 14, I've been in many situations where adults in school or hospitals have allowed me to believe that I could and should make decisions that I did not understand without consulting my mom. Not only was I mentally not mature enough to be making these decisions, but almost always these decisions were made during crisis situations when even an adult would have difficulty using their best judgment. Throughout my teenage years, I was in and out of shelters. I dropped out of high school. I never went to a school dance or got a driver's license. I didn't get the opportunity to go to college. And this setback will impact my life for years, financially and mentally. These laws are not just allowing, but also supporting kids to make decisions that can and possibly will impact them with negative sorry, guys. These laws are not just allowing, but also supporting kids to make decisions that can and possibly will impact them with negative consequences. The adults working in schools do not have to live with the consequences of these decisions. We, the youth, do. I was sure at the time that I was making good decisions and that because of what the adults were saying, I should make those decisions. I look back as I endure the consequences and wish every day that they had just called my mom and let her be the parent. I was 14 at the time and I'm now 18. I've lived with the consequences of being treated like an adult too soon every single day. So that's all I'm going to read of it. But that is, I think, I wish we could get more youth voices like hers. I wish that she felt like she could safely speak up on her own, because I think that is a really powerful statement that we have these adults who are encouraging children who are in crisis. Most of these kids are in crisis, whether they're just in emotional distress or they're having a full-blown mental health crisis or they're having some kind of gender identity issues going on, or they're just being influenced, they're being bullied or whatever it is. They're not in a position to be making these decisions that are going to impact them for the rest of their lives. And as you know, as I read, she's 18 now. And they offer these kids a whole lot of services and things and host homes and shelters. And then the day they turn 18, they're out and they offer them nothing. And so to me, this whole thing is a big, huge middle finger to the parents. We're going to take your kids, we're going to court your kids. And then when they're 18 and they're legal adults, we don't really have a need for them anymore. So this is really an agenda against families. And I probably didn't need to say that. You probably already know that. But this is these adults, and I know you're probably all well aware that a lot of the staff in the schools are activists. They are influencing your kids in ways that are not good. They're anti. A lot of these people are anti-American, and you know the whole LGBTQ agenda. We could go on. That's a whole separate video all on its own. But you don't have, for the most part, there are good folks out there here and there. And I've been fortunate, and my daughter, you know, our family has been fortunate that occasionally we'll encounter a social worker who truly wanted to help our daughter and wanted to help our family and kind of went against the law in order to do that. But the activist one, I've also talked to a number of bad actors when in all the years, you know, it's been 4 years now. It'll be 4 years on Monday since we started down this road. And these are the kinds of people that they're hiring now in schools. And so parents need to know that. I mean, the schools are failing the kids academically, and they're indoctrinating. I mean, it's just a hot mess. So there's so many reasons to get your kids out of public schools. So my number two, going back to my tweet here, number two, the intent behind 1296. It's not so much what it changes and reverting it back to the way it was. It truly is, like I said, it's a middle finger to parents. It's the state knows better than you. The state is the parents. And we can and we will do this to your kids. I think the biggest thing you can do, number 3, stop co-parenting with the government. Get your kids out of public schools. Now, today, do the hard thing. And, I think about when 4 years ago on March 17th, when everything happened with my daughter. And, it was like 3 weeks of stuff that happened before we were able to get her out of Washington State. But during that time period, I realized I have to get my child out of the state where I can make decisions for her. She was in a mental health crisis and I needed her out of the state in order to be able to be her parent. And that was not an easy thing for me to do. I had to push pause on life. I had 3 other kids at home. I'm flying out of the state. I was traveling a lot just to, try and manage with this one child. And, it was financial drain, emotional drain. It was very disruptive to our whole family, but we as parents do hard things. So I say this to you because do the hard thing now while you have control over the hard thing. Don't wait until you're in a crisis situation like we have been a number of times. And and you're having to figure things out on the fly in emotional distress. So I really, really encourage you to have conversations with your spouse about how you can, if you've got kids in school, please try to whether get them in a homeschooling co-op or whatever. But and if you decide to homeschool, there are so many resources out there, so many different resources that want to help parents homeschool. We will help you navigate that and help you find those. Contact Leslie at conservativeladiesofamerica.com. Let her know you want to homeschool and she'll either help you or she'll connect you to someone else on our team and we will get you plugged in. My number 4 is Republicans should vote no on every single education bill that adds funding to OSPI. Every single one of them. That should be their, even though the bills are going to pass anyway, that should be their defiance of we are not going to say yes to any more funding for OSPI. Okay, number 5. It's going to make people mad. People don't like it when I say this. Get your children out of Washington. It is not safe for kids. And if you say, but we need people to stay and fight, I'm sorry. But if you have the ability to get out of Washington State to save your kids are your priority, not saving Washington State. That is not, you do not sacrifice your kids to save Washington State. Washington State is gone. And if you want to stay and fight and you can keep your kids safe because they're homeschooled or you're homesteading or whatever, great. But if your kids have to go to public school, please get them out of Washington State. And there are a number of other things, and I'll get into this in a few minutes, but there are a number of other ways that the government controls your kids, even if they're not in public school. Okay, lastly, number 6, it's a parent's duty to protect the child, not the government. So stop waiting. Stop waiting for Donald Trump to do something. Stop waiting for Pam Bondi. Stop waiting for Scott Presler to come fix Washington elections, because those things are highly unlikely. It's not impossible, but very, very highly unlikely to happen. So it is your duty. It is our duty. That's our job as parents, to do whatever it takes to protect our kids. So I want to show you really quickly the bill. And this is just a portion. It's 17 pages. This is just a portion. So I just wanted to show you the text where they're striking, you can see their medical or health records. They've struck in that. They did move, you could maybe see attendances in there somewhere. I can't see where it is at the moment. But they did strike it and then they put it back in somewhere else. So just wanted you to see how they have done that. They put access to curriculum and some other things in there, but really what this has done is it has stricken parents' access to the most critical records that their student might have. Now, another thing that you should know is a lot of schools in Washington have what are called school-based health centers, SBHCs. And these are funded by Washington taxpayers. And oftentimes they get bipartisan support in the legislature, which is really unfortunate because schools should not be in the business of doing healthcare, mental health care, any healthcare shouldn't be in schools. But these school-based health centers are separate from, while they're in the school, they're also separate from the school. So these records are medical records. So they're not part of the child's school record. And, you know, wherever your child is in school, if they're over 13, your child has to sign a waiver for you to have access to their medical and mental health records. So that's something that if you have kiddos that are under 13 and you're going to stick around in Washington, you might want to talk to a lawyer about having some kind of form signed when your kiddo turns 13 that gives you access to all of their medical and mental health records, talk to the doctors, things like that. So in 2023, Washington passed Senate Bill 5599. And if you've been around and paying attention for the last couple of years, you probably remember that because there was a lot of national attention on it. And what Senate Bill 5599 does is it allows children of any age who want to have what Washington calls protected health care, which is abortion or so-called gender-affirming care. It allows them to access these services and be placed in a youth shelter or a host home. Now, these host homes, I'm not going to go in depth on the host homes, but the rules are very loosey-goosey on who can be a host home kind of person. So I think that is super sketchy on what kind of people might be doing the host homes. I certainly wouldn't want my kid to go to a host home. Given who Washington puts into schools and things like that, and all the child predators that are teachers in schools. So it allows them to go to these host homes, and there's no parent notification. DCYF, after the child is placed in the shelter or the host home, and how long does that take? Is that same day? Like you sent your child off to 7th grade this morning and they didn't come home on the bus and they went to a youth shelter or host home at some point in the day because they're going to start doing hormone therapy or something. At what point does the parent get to find out that this has all taken place? I mean, you know, Johnny didn't get off the bus this afternoon. What's going on? You're calling the police. Police can't tell you. So you have to wait until DCYF tells you. I don't know what the notification period is. I forget. I don't know offhand. So if you think this is like the reason I'm bringing this up is because a lot of people are like, I can't believe they've gone and done this 1296 thing. I can't believe they passed this. Honestly, to me, 1296 is far less egregious than 5599. 5599 allows them to take your child from you and hide your kid. They'll tell you that your kid is safe and in a host home. They won't tell you where. That is, and the fact that people are still sending their kids to public school after 5599. I pulled a clip from floor debate on Senate Bill 5599. This is from March 14th of 2023. So almost 2 years ago. I want you to, if you watched some of the debate last night, this will sound familiar to you, but I want you to watch this because it really speaks to what their agenda is and what their priority is and the messaging that they put out to the public and to their voters. They
are constantly told, you cannot be uniquely you. You cannot be something other than what I desire for you to be. And if you do not follow my rules, you cannot be here. If you want to follow my rules, I'm not even going to give you the safety, the comfort that you so desire when you want to be uniquely you. Mr. Speaker, the microaggressions, the language of parents, I really wish more parents had the skills that the parents who are in this room talking about how they would want to affirm their children but say no. I wish more parents had that. But when I see a young person come to me on a regular basis saying, I can't go home. Home is not safe. Am I not going to do something? Are we not going to do something? Am I going to let them stay out on the street, homeless, at risk to being picked up by somebody who will say all the right things and make them do all the wrong things? Am I going to risk this child being in the middle of the cold, not knowing whether they're going to have somewhere to go tonight, all because they can't go home to a place where we don't know what those threats are going to actually be? I tell you, there are some unhealthy family dynamics out there, and that child wants to go home, wants to see the love from their parent. They just need some way to communicate better with their parent. Their parent needs another way to speak to this child to get them through the toughest parts of their life. We must step in. We must provide a place for this child. Mr. Speaker, I urge you to vote no on this amendment.
So that really, I think, is enlightening and speaks volumes about what they think of families and what they think of the family home and parents. And keep in mind that they're talking about like a parent like me, right? If my daughter came to me and said, I think I'm a boy, I'm not just going to affirm that. I'm going to, have some discussions with her and get to the bottom of that and figure that out. And I'm going to actually affirm her gender and that God made her perfect. God does not make mistakes. I'm going to have those conversations with her, which to the Democrats, that is a dangerous and unhealthy home environment. I am a danger to my child based on my views about this topic. So it's really important that parents understand that in the eyes of the Democrats, if you are, if you have conservative views, if you have Christian views or, what other religious views, the Democrats are not tolerant of that, and they do want to get your children away from you. Another thing I wanted to show you from this particular time period 2 years ago was this is a cover from, or the article cover from the AP. Trans minors protected from parents under Washington law. This is the mindset. They believe that these kids, and whether they're trans or not, because as I mentioned earlier, my daughter wants you all to know she never had gender issues. They will do, and I think that they will target the kids of conservative parents. And of course, you think about 2021, if you Google Julie Barrett, it was pretty easy to see, I had started Conservative Ladies of Washington. We were well underway. We had just launched 3 weeks earlier. I'm sure they knew exactly who I was, which probably made things even more difficult for us. But this is the mindset. They are protecting kids from their parents. They see parents as the enemy. And so that's what's 2023. 2022, and this is a bill that didn't get nearly enough attention, and a lot of people don't know about it. 2022 was the setup for, so Senate Bill 5883. This was the setup for 5599. And 2022 was my first session being involved in Washington legislature. And my daughter was actually out of state receiving treatment at that time. She was at a school where she got school, and she was able to get some mental health help and all of that. And so, I was visiting her a lot. I was flying a lot. I was kind of managing that whole situation. Plus we had 3 teenagers at home, and I was testifying as much as I could. I think it was my way of coping and keeping myself from being a crying heap in the corner of my closet. But 5883 in 2022 was my passion bill. I testified on that bill at least 4 times, maybe even more. And this was the youth homeless bill. And what this bill did is it would allow a minor child, it would allow an adult to give a minor child homeless status without verifying if they were homeless or not. So it would have allowed what happened to my daughter. It would have allowed a child to go stay in a homeless shelter without verifying if that child had parents or not, if that child was truly homeless. There were, excuse me, need a sip. Excuse me. There were a number of Republican amendments on 5883, just like you saw last night if you watched 1296, to make that they would have to verify any provider, whether it was a doctor or mental health or a shelter or host home, they would have to verify that the child was in fact homeless. And the Democrats voted down every single one of those amendments. I was devastated actually, and that was our year that I told my husband we have to get out of Washington state, because I realized how dangerous it was for my children. And the daughter that was out of state has a twin sister that we were having some issues with her in school. And so that was really the impetus for us deciding to consider leaving Washington, which we ended up buying a house about 6 months later in Florida. So, and now we're totally out of state. But I say that because a lot of people don't even know about Senate Bill 5883. A lot of people seem to have forgotten about Senate Bill 5599. And all of these laws, the Parents' Bill of Rights didn't change any of these laws that are horrible for children, horrible for parents. And so I just wanted to like refresh your memory, because 1296 is a terrible bill. And the Democrats are, really, this is an evil agenda and it's an evil policy, and we need to call it what it is. There's no, I mean, they're going to pass one of these bills. So this is going to happen to public schools. Even if you pull I had an exchange on X earlier today that, about, parents need to mass unenroll kids. That will send a message. And the kind of comeback to that was, but that doesn't pull the funding. Well, maybe not, but they want your children probably more than they want the money, or kind of both. They need your kids to have the money. But anyway, that would send a statement. So please do consider that. I'm going to go to the chat here. I see there's a lot going on. Oh man, Nightwolf, I am so sorry to hear about your stepdaughter. I hate hearing, I just hate hearing that people have had to go through this. It's just so, it's so awful. And, as when you talk about this, and I'm pretty open with our story, then people start talking, you start hearing people start coming out of the woodwork to tell you their stories, whether publicly or privately. I get a lot of, emails and private messages from parents that have had encounters, and it's just devastating. And one of the things that I hear so often, I've heard so many times, my child was suicidal and is now in a mental hospital. Because what happens is, if they go to an emergency room, and then they go to one of the adolescent mental hospitals in Washington, and usually that's like a 7-day stay. And that's where you won't have access to when your kid goes off to the emergency room. You only get access if the child says, and that depends on the personnel at the hospital, or and if they are encouraging the child to speak with you or not. And we've experienced both, because we've done this a number of times. But yeah, so I hear from parents that their kids are, in the mental hospital or in a youth shelter, and they want to know, how do I get my kid out? And with the passage of 5883, we wouldn't have been able to get, unfortunately, we got my daughter out of the youth shelter the year before. And we had Seattle police helped us do that. There were 8 Seattle police officers. It was like a 6-hour standoff. After 5883 passed, we would have been out of luck. And so it breaks my heart to hear parents in these situations trying to figure out how to get their kids out of state. And the biggest thing is wait until they discharge your child from the hospital. Make sure that you are there to get your kid and that they don't, undercut you and send your kid to a youth shelter or something like that. Get there, get your kid, and your kid probably needs to get out of state. They probably need some kind of care out of state. Obviously Idaho's the quickest place, but Arizona and Utah are good for if you have kiddos in mental health crises. I don't see any questions. Leslie, am I missing any questions? I saw something about the gas stoves. I forget. I'm sorry. I forget if that was Nightwolf or somebody else. But the gas stoves that did not pass. So that is a good thing. That's sleeping for a little bit longer, and hopefully, and wood burning stoves. Were there two different gas? There's a gas and wood burning stoves. The other one that didn't pass that's really good is House Bill 1399, which would have given the Criminal Justice Training Commission or whatever the ability to defund, decertify, your county sheriff. And the commission is the commission is overseen by the governor. So essentially that's the governor decertifying your sheriff. So that's a good thing. What else? I'm trying to think if there was anything else that passed yesterday. 5708. Just really quickly, and then I'll end the stream. I know I've gone over my 30 minutes. So, but y'all are still here. So 5708 is this protecting children online. There was a companion bill on the House side, House Bill 1834. 5708 passed yesterday, last night. And both of these bills had a clause that stated minor children would be notified if their parent had some kind of like parental controls or any kind of tracking devices on their phone or their device. It would notify them, and that's a huge violation, overstepping the government's authority. And that was actually removed from 5708. But there are a number of issues with this bill, and I'm not a techie person. So I did send this off to a couple of the guys that work with our team that are techies, and asked them to take a look at it, because my concerns with this bill, it would only apply to minors in Washington state, and these companies, these providers would have to determine if a child was a minor. So they would have to do quite an extensive data collection. And to ensure that they were in the state of Washington, they would have to do geolocation tracking. I know that there's a lot of that's already being done, but would this actually give them access to more of your child's data? That's kind of what I'm trying to uncover. It seemed like this would be that we would probably not support this policy. Plus, I think that it should be up to a parent to decide, which apps your kids should have on their phone. It would also disable push notifications to minors between the hours of 8 and 3, Monday through Friday. Well, what if your school gets out on a half day every Wednesday, like our school district did? Or what if there's, a few days off during the middle of the week, and all the school districts have different vacation schedules. So it just seems like a lot of government. And so we're conservatives and we don't like a lot of government. And I think the responsibility to control a child's internet activity is upon the parent. So that's kind of my gut position on that. Now that the parental thing has been pulled out, I don't necessarily think it made it a better bill, but a number of Republicans voted for this. So hopefully when it goes over to the House side, that won't be the case. That's what I'm hoping anyway. So thanks so much for joining me today. Please do share this video, the replay of this video, so that other people, parents in Washington, are aware of the reality of what's going on, and network with your friends. If you're gonna like pull your kids out of school, network with your neighbors and your friends and figure out how could we like tag team and do this so that it's not so much responsibility on one set of parents. Because if you did like the pod thing, that might be easier. Anyway, so I hope you guys all have a great weekend, and I'll be back next week at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, right here for another live. So I'll see you next week.